just returned from North Korea with severe brain damage, has now died.
North Korea stands out as one of the world's most secretive and closed-off nations. This secrecy serves the regime's overarching goal of controlling both its citizens and the external perception of the country. Governed by a totalitarian regime, North Korea enforces a multitude of unusual rules and imposes harsh penalties. Join us as we show you 20 bizarre things that only exist in North Korea.
대륙간 탄도 로켓 장착용 수소탄 시험에서 완전 성공.
Number 20. Caste system based on loyalty. North Korea has instituted an elaborate songbun system that essentially grades all citizens based on their perceived loyalty to the ruling Kim dynasty. This caste-like system determines every aspect of a North Korean's life based on their classification. The songbun system sorts all citizens into three broad categories: the core, wavering, and hostile classes. The core class, about 25% of the population, consists of individuals considered most loyal to the regime. They are descendants of anti-Japanese guerrilla fighters, revolutionary comrades of Kim Il-sung, or those who have done great service to the ruling family. As the most trusted group, the core class receives the best opportunities and privileges in areas like occupations, education, medical care, housing, and food rations. Their neighborhoods are concentrated in Pyongyang and other major cities with access to imported luxuries. Intergenerational ties ensure their children inherit the perk and highest societal status, cementing an elite inner circle. At the opposite end, those branded as hostile, making up 27% of citizens, face discrimination purely based on familial links to landowners, capitalists, religious adherents, and political dissidents. Their neighborhoods are relegated to the most impoverished and underserved regions. Jobs, schooling, housing, and marriage prospects are severely curtailed too for those with low songbun, dooming generations to exclusion and hardship. The wavering class forms the majority in the middle with neutral or unknown loyalty. While less marginalized than hostiles, they still lack privileges and must work harder to prove political allegiance. Number 19. Sham elections. Elections are periodically held in North Korea for seats in the Supreme People's Assembly and provincial and city assemblies, presenting a veneer of democracy and popular choice to the country's political process. Yet beneath the surface, these elections are elaborate shams, meticulously orchestrated to consolidate the power of the ruling regime, rather than genuinely reflecting the will of the people. Established as a facade of democratic processes, North Korean elections feature only one candidate on the ballot in each district. These candidates are carefully selected by the Democratic Front for the Reunification of the Fatherland, an entity effectively controlled by the ruling Korean Workers' Party. This ensures there are no genuine electoral options or opposition candidates, transforming the electoral process into a mere symbolic act. Abstaining from voting is not an option, as it is strictly forbidden. Mandatory for all eligible citizens, voting becomes a symbolic pledge of loyalty to the political system, rather than a true expression of preference. Failure to vote can lead to administrative penalties or work demotions, making the act of voting a tool for the regime to compel compliance and monitor the population. Turnout in North Korean elections is officially reported to be nearly 100%, a statistic propagated by state media to portray universal participation and approval. Number 18. Brainwashed from birth. From infancy, North Korean citizens face intensive indoctrination, saturating every aspect of life to cement absolute loyalty to the ruling Kim family dynasty above all else. This starts as early as nursery school, with heavy exposure to militaristic propaganda infused into playtime for toddlers through patriotic songs, books, and toys glorifying the armed forces. Classrooms feature colorful cartoons and decorations depicting weapon-toting animal soldiers enthusiastically attacking enemies of the state. Toy sets for preschool-aged children include machine guns, hand grenades, and rocket launchers to subtly encourage military devotion. Various North Korean children's songs drill into kids' lyrics about happily sacrificing themselves for their dear leaders. This propaganda barrage marches children into the state-run Young Pioneer Corps youth mass organization once they start grade school. Through their teenage years, activities continue to focus on internalizing loyalty to national leadership above family ties or individualism. North Korean scouts chant about growing up to become guns and bombs for the general about Kim Jong-un. Number 17. hackers, and cryptocurrency. North Korea represents one of the most prolific nation-state actors engaged in cryptocurrency hacking and theft. State-sponsored groups like the infamous Lazarus Group target digital exchanges and online wallets to steal billions in virtual assets to generate revenue by flouting sanctions. It provides Pyongyang access to fungible crypto funds easily laundered internationally to bankroll weapons programs and further cyber operations. Analysts assess North Korea-affiliated cybercriminals behind some of the biggest digital currency heists, with $3.8 billion stolen globally just in 2022. Lazarus Group serves as the regime's elite hacking squad, composed of thousands of skilled operatives trained in cyber warfare techniques by associated intelligence bureaus. Their dark web exploits, sponsored by the regime, give Pyongyang immense funding while preserving deniability regarding attributions. Sophisticated phishing lures, code exploits, and malware empower Lazarus in pillaging crypto assets from sources worldwide. Recent thefts include a $100 million hack targeting Harmony blockchain bridge infrastructure and a separate $625 million exploit of Ronin network, utilized in the popular Axie Infinity online game. Such colossal single-incident hauls contribute to annual cumulative plunder estimated as high as $1 billion in virtual currencies, and North Korea continues honing more advanced penetration skills for targeting DeFi sites and cross-chain bridges. Stolen assets like Bitcoin then get washed through foreign exchanges or invested into private cryptocurrencies to hide transactional traces from pursuers. This generates fluid capital reusable for weapons procurement or funding additional Lazarus cyber ops. So, with few viable sanctions workarounds, Pyongyang embraces cryptocrime to stay solvent. Number 16. Pleasure Squad. Among all the hidden secrets of North Korea and the Kim dynasty, perhaps the most disturbing is the Kipumjo, also known as the Pleasure Squad. This group comprises unfortunate females who are forcibly recruited, totaling approximately 2,000 women and girls. It is maintained by the leader of North Korea to provide entertainment for high-ranking Workers' Party of Korea officials and their families, as well as, occasionally, distinguished guests. The origins of the Kipumjo can be traced back to the 1970s, when Kim Jong-il, the father of the current leader Kim Jong-un, first established this clandestine organization. While ostensibly created for entertainment purposes, the Pleasure Squad has a dark history rooted in systemic human rights abuses. The recruitment process is coercive, often involving the abduction of young women from their homes. Once inducted into the squad, these women are subjected to intense indoctrination and closely monitored to ensure loyalty to the regime. The Kipumjo's existence reflects the oppressive nature of the North Korean regime, where the leader's whims take precedence over basic human rights. The women in the Pleasure Squad face not only physical and emotional exploitation, but also the constant fear of punishment for any perceived disloyalty. Attempts to escape this life are met with severe consequences, including imprisonment and even execution, illustrating the lack of personal freedom under totalitarian rule. Despite the international community's awareness of these human rights abuses, the isolationist policies of North Korea have made it challenging to intervene. Number 15. 28 websites. Unlike much of the connected planet, North Korea's nationwide internet access remains profoundly restricted, both in scale and scope. Estimates indicate only high-ranking government officials and university academics gain approval to access networked computers based on intensive background checks by intelligence agencies. These eligible users face strict surveillance monitoring all activities through software logging and video capture. Visiting any unapproved sites results in severe penalization extending toward family members. Only 28 websites exist on the entire North Korean intranet, reflecting extremely narrow controlled content. Domestically, most North Koreans lack awareness of the greater World Wide Web, with online life forever confined to this walled garden network dubbed Kwangmyong, meaning bright light. Here, briefing materials glorify leadership activities as the only virtual reality deemed appropriate by state censors. Even amongst the select 1,000 or so fortunate ruling elites with intranet access, oversight stays stringent, forcing self-regulation towards propaganda posts and informational reports from state media organs only. Technically resourceful citizens who manage to access outside websites via restricted connections face 70 years imprisonment minimum as enemies of the state if detected. Number 14. Juche Calendar. North Korea reinforces nationalist exceptionalism by rejecting Western calendars in favor of a unique system grounded upon the birth date of eternal leader Kim Il-sung. This Juche calendar symbolizes the shift from older imperial and Gregorian dating conventions towards a customized approach directly referencing 1912, the year of Kim's birth. It serves political aims diminishing foreign influences while amplifying cult ideology, venerating the Kim bloodline posterior to all other milestones. Under the previous Christian-influenced calendar, North Korea shared many major holidays with South Korea and other regional nations based upon ancient seasonal equinox timings. But to further distance itself from capitalist rivals, North Korea gradually transitioned civil dating towards the Juche calendar between 1997 and 2013. This anchored the new schema directly upon Kim Il-sung's April 15th birthday, coinciding with the Day of the Sun celebration. Now annual commemorations and key societal dates align with Kim-centric numerology, amplifying personalized veneration. The shift also disconnected many shared international holidays and milestones, weakening cultural commonalities with the outside world. Events like New Year's Day now transpire on April 15th rather than January 1st, reflecting regime priorities. The calendar further isolates citizens behind yet another structural barrier, differentiating their society from foreign systems. Much like linguistic honorifics elevating Kim names, the Juche calendar keeps reinforcing deference psychologically from birth each year. It embeds regime mythology deeper across generations, subtly harnessing institutional timing innovations towards personalist agendas. No matter the year, domestic consciousness always revolves back, emphasizing Kim's. Number 13. Laughter ban. When North Korea's supreme leader Kim Jong-il died from a heart attack on December 17, 2011, the reclusive regime plunged into a prolonged period of intense grieving marked by bizarre mandated behavior modifications and rituals. Immediately after his demise was confirmed, authorities banned common human reactions like laughing, leisure activities, and even grocery shopping across the nation. In their place, somber displays of despondency took precedence as the only allowed emotional outlet. For 11 straight days, North Koreans could not publicly smile, chuckle, or exhibit any shade of happiness without risking harsh disciplining. Shopping for basic household needs also ceased under the decree that citizens should focus solely on communal mourning efforts. Instead, people gathered in groups, wailing at the top of their lungs in choreographed shows of hysterical despair over Kim Jong-il's sudden demise. Restrictions also forbade venues like restaurants, bars, and nightclubs from opening, eliminating any contrary moods. Songs, dances, celebrations, or other frivolities faced prohibition under temporary laws requiring visible bereavement. Those failing to exhibit sufficient sadness risked impressions of improper devotion to the successor Kim Jong-un as he consolidated power. Mandated grief served political purposes, testing loyalty, augmented by state propaganda, lionizing the deceased Kim as their benevolent savior. The highly controlled reactions cemented veneration. The entire population essentially got placed under house arrest, forcing mournful compliance for 11 days until Kim Jong-il's funeral was completed. It underscored regime control over every facet of life, regulating permissible emotions. And such totalitarian restrictions created yet another burden for common citizens already struggling daily. Number 12. Horrendous healthcare. Despite bold proclamations of advanced healthcare and medical sciences, North Korea's hospitals resemble third-world conditions. With frequent shortages of electricity, a lack of modern technologies, and stringent sanctions limiting imported supplies, treatment options are extraordinarily limited. The hospital deals with illnesses through folk remedies and natural herbs, rather than advanced evidence-based medicine. Access to antibiotics or intravenous fluids remains scarce, even for traumatic injuries or major infections. The complete absence of computer systems or diagnostic lab equipment likewise hampers doctors, so terrible diseases and injuries likely go entirely undiagnosed or mistreated. Rather, crude solutions get substituted, like using high-concentration iodine as a disinfectant when no alternatives exist. Surgeries might occur on rusty tables without X-rays or sterile equipment. Hospital beds lack sheets or mattresses, with patients lying on wooden planks. Such woeful conditions within the medical system mean illnesses probably spread rapidly in barracks, while injuries frequently result in amputations or death due to untenable circumstances. Number 11. No blue jeans. In 2021, reports emerged from North Korea detailing a peculiar set of rules governing clothing. Adding to the already known restrictions on approved haircuts, it was suggested that Kim Jong-un, the leader of the country, had implemented laws dictating what the citizens could wear. This marked a further step in the leader's plan to exert control over perceived symbols of capitalism. The prohibition on blue jeans became a prominent aspect of these clothing regulations. The leader, Kim Jong-un, aimed to curb the influence of what he deemed to be symbols of capitalist excess. This move was part of a broader strategy to mold the societal fabric according to the regime's ideological framework. The introduction of such clothing restrictions reflects the regime's determination to assert its influence even on seemingly mundane aspects of daily life. Kim Jong-un's directives, including dress codes, are not merely sartorial preferences, but strategic tools aimed at shaping a narrative that aligns with the regime's ideology. Number 10. Hidden drug trade. Amid its heavily controlled Stalinist economy, North Korea maintains a hidden billion-dollar illicit drug trade. This covert trafficking of illegal substances generates crucial foreign currency for the oppressive Kim dynasty. Despite extremely strict drug laws domestically, the regime is involved in manufacturing and exporting massive quantities of narcotics. These covert operations prominently include the production and smuggling of methamphetamines and other potent stimulants. Intelligence estimates gauge the scale of North Korea's drug trade to be worth approximately $1 billion annually. Some experts further indicate that illicit drug sales comprise almost a third of the nation's total export revenues. It represents an enormous criminal enterprise conducted in the shadows by a tyrannical government to skirt economic sanctions. An array of foreign crime syndicates from Asia, Europe, and beyond have relationships with North Korean operatives to distribute narcotics globally following exportation. Methamphetamines make up a large portion of the pills and powders trafficked abroad. Domestically, the stimulants help prop up a fatigued and malnourished populace to increase productivity. They supply an adrenaline boost for both civilian factory workers and military personnel who constantly operate near starvation. This chemical assistance builds dependency, facilitating control. Excess supplies instead get smuggled across borders by train, plane, and maritime routes aided by international distributors. Despite staunch laws sentencing even cannabis use to labor camps, the regime itself engages in trafficking narcotics purely for profitable reasons. Number 9. Brutality in Camp 22 prison. Camp 22 represents one of North Korea's most horrific prison facilities featuring systemic cruelty. Those imprisoned suffer constant misery from backbreaking slave labor, starvation rations, disease, and brutalization. Prisoners get worked to death under threat of torture, public execution, or harsh beatings for any perceived infractions. Estimates suggest 20 to 25% of prisoners die every year from appalling incarceration conditions. Reasons for imprisonment include suspected political dissent, critical comments against the regime, religious affiliation, and perceived disloyalty towards the ruling Kim family. Even minor violations result in offenders being shipped to nightmarish facilities like Camp 22 alongside their entire families down to young children. Here, prisoners carry on forced labor tasks like logging, mining, and fieldwork for over 12 hours daily, on near-starvation diets of cornmeal and salt. Malnourishment causes rampant health problems, which get ignored since the facility lacks medical support. Camp 22 further terrorizes inmates through unchecked violence. Public executions by firing squads or hangings occur regularly to intimidate prisoners into absolute compliance. Sexual assaults plague female inmates by guards and officials. Beatings, mutilations, or torture sessions also frequently mete out as arbitrary punishment. These gruesome conditions sustain a 20 to 25% annual fatality rate from exhaustion, illness, injury, and trauma, both mental and physical. In this way, Camp 22 inflicts maximum pain to eradicate perceived state enemies. It operates on ruthless cruelty involving lifelong sentencing and nightmarish environs leading to eventual death. Number 8. Restrictive rules on media. The information represents danger within North Korea's totalitarian system. Therefore, the regime goes to extreme measures, censoring outside media and heavily restricting approved domestic content to reinforce cultural isolation. Authorities tightly regulate all internal publications, broadcasts, and artistic performances to prevent foreign influences deemed dangerous penetration. Possessing unsanctioned films, television shows, or news reports spells severe consequences for offenders. Foreign media entrance faces near impossible barriers to maintaining secrecy and monopoly over narratives. Domestic media creation goes through intensive filtering by dense bureaucracies checking for any sign of nonconformity before dissemination approval. This applies equally to newspapers, radio, music, fine art, and burgeoning intranet content carefully scrubbed of potentially dissenting angles. Guidelines further stress proper ideological representation, with penalties against creators for perceived failures to properly extol the Kim family. Any source material circumventing established vetting channels automatically gets classified as contraband, facing total suppression. Number 7. Bomb shelter subway. On the surface, Pyongyang's impressive metro system appears a source of national pride and modern engineering feat, but its actual design harbors a more pragmatic purpose, doubling as an enormous bomb shelter with integrated defensive fortifications. The subway stretches as far down as 360 feet towards rock bottom, making it the deepest in the world. This allows the tube tunnels to provide immense protective cover. It gives a sanctum capable of holding hundreds of thousands of people during aerial attacks or artillery barrages. Various foreign media tours have been granted restricted access to showcase the metro's shelters. Ornate stations dazzle visitors with artistic propaganda murals, chandeliers, and imposing statues of Kim Dynasty's dear leaders. But this hides structural reinforcements indicating more defense-oriented considerations. Blast doors thicker than bank vaults plus anti-chemical filtration systems point towards intentions beyond mere transport. And while only a small operational fraction gets displayed, the network's full scale remains classified. This extensive infrastructure fuels suspicions that Pyongyang's subway system serves greater importance than mobility. It functions as the heart of the regime's emergency civil defense plans. As the deepest metro globally, its design seems centered on sheltering political elites and core loyalists for extended durations, rather than commuter transit logistics. Its bomb-proof tunnels and fortified stations practically comprise an underground city for the upper echelons. Foreign visitors just glimpse a veneer of the extensive shelters likely existing secretly. Number 6. Three-generation punishment rule. North Korea's brutal methods for stamping out dissent extend past targeting only accused individuals. Instead, punishments expand outwards to eradicate their entire family bloodline through repercussions against relatives spanning 3 generations. This collective penalty system, known as Yeonjwa-jae, seeks to eliminate real or potential dissent lineage permanently via imprisonment, enslavement, or execution applied to grandparents, parents, siblings, and offspring alike. The regime justifies this indiscriminate intergenerational punishment basis by claiming shared genetic trials and upbringings among families naturally spread seeds of discontent. Therefore, whenever accusations emerge against any individual, whether for dissent, perceived disrespect to leadership, or attempted flight interrogators, then use torture to extract potential names of living relatives. Following forced confessions, security forces move to round up entire extended families for collective incarceration, regardless of direct complicity or age. With famines already forcing people towards illegal activities just for survival, this mass punishment phenomenon is controlled through terror. It discourages internal criticism or defection attempts if endangering loved ones. Fear of unintentionally harming even distant relatives restrains grievances, so agencies like the Ministry of State Security frequently disappear whole families into forced labor camps whenever political reliability gets questioned. Their re-education mingles with endemic diseases, executions, malnutrition, and despair. Hard labor continues until at least 3 generations live out sentences or perish from the grueling conditions. No earlier releases gain granted for minors or babies born imprisoned. Instead, the brutalized family lines end up eliminated or thoroughly intimidated against future thought crimes following decades inside. It drives home that perceived infractions against the state result in generational consequences. Now it's time for today's subscriber pick. The women in North Korean uniform face all the same hardships as their male counterparts, plus additional layers of sexism, violence, and deprivation intrinsic to their gender. Brutal mistreatments in training and service include physical punishments, sexual assault, forced abortions, shameful indecencies regarding feminine hygiene, and an ingrained chauvinistic mindset. As one aspect, training for female soldiers intensifies already harsh conditions, with male instructors often forcing women to endure longer runs, less food, and heavier loads. Trainees who fall short face being beaten sometimes to death. When do you think these disturbing practices will come to an end? And what can be done to stop these practices? Share your thoughts in the comments. Number 5. Horrific punishments. While North Korean authorities enforce obedience from the populace through pervasive networks of informants and surveillance, punishments against those that stray remain utterly cruel even by autocratic standards. Facing criminal charges inside the Hermit Kingdom's warped justice system means enduring brutalization almost unthinkable coming from a modern government against its people. Sentencing frequently incorporates medieval tortures, maiming and spectacle killings, prolonging agony as warnings toward wider audiences. One especially savage punishment method, applied frequently against perceived state enemies, sees condemned placed within target zones for obliteration by anti-aircraft cannons. Victims get shackled inside the gun's trajectories helplessly, whilst gunners unleash barrages, shredding them apart in front of crowds, including their family members, forced to observe the carnage. What remains of mutilated corpses afterward resembles bloody piles of torn meat, rather than human bodies. Yet disseminated propaganda frames such dehumanizing deaths as a righteous necessity against domestic threats, claiming cannon sites remain soaked in betrayers' blood. Prominent officials receiving anti-aircraft executions have included Jang Song-taek, Kim Jong-un's uncle deemed disloyal, to Hyun Yong-chol, the defense minister killed by such artillery firing with understood charges of dozing off during military events. Declassified interviews with defectors further reveal cases when senior construction managers faced obliterative punishment for seemingly minor issues like faulty palace furnishings offending the impulsive Kim ruler. Number 4. No choice. When North Korean youth reach 17 years of age, they immediately lose the right to plot their futures or ambitions. At this pivotal age, all males and females must report for compulsory military service enrollment by the country's constitution and laws. Very sparse exemptions exist, while attempts to refuse or dodge conscription lead to severe detention punishments. Most young North Koreans simply dread their 17th birthdays, seeing it only as a countdown to their forced assimilation into rigid military life, completely outside civilian control. The sons and daughters of high-ranking elites often face exclusion from conscription requirements or deployment to safer domestic posts, showing the class divisions at play underneath outward propaganda, treating all soldiers as heroic. After compulsory enrollment, young North Korean draftees have no input over how many years they must serve or where the state assigns them. Terms range from 5 to 8 years for most female conscripts, while males face longer 8-year postings. Geographically, soldiers go wherever top commanders dictate, far from their homes. Once the government labels conscripts as members of its Korean People's Army, they become state property with no personal freedoms over their futures. Some scholars note that strict conscription was relatively limited under Kim Il-sung, as more citizens volunteered out of genuine revolutionary zeal. But his descendants implemented broader forced enrollments as economic decline and societal disillusionment set in. The regime came to increasingly depend on coercive military manpower policies rather than devotion alone to retain its grip. Number 3. Squalid living conditions. The typical living quarters of North Korean soldiers are miserably overcrowded and unsanitary concrete barracks stuffed beyond reasonable capacity. Sleeping, eating, training, and all other aspects of a soldier's existence revolve around these decrepit military barracks dotted across North Korea. Within cramped rooms of the barracks, soldiers sleep around 20 to 40 troops crammed together in bunk beds on hard mattresses stuffed with cheap rice hulls rather than cloth. The rice hull fillings get drenched in sweat with no ventilation, causing foul odors within the stagnant confines. Many barracks lack basics like running water or flushing toilets, forcing soldiers to wash up outside with hoses or buckets drawn from wells. Heating is also scarce during North Korea's frigid winters that can plunge to negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. Soldiers huddle around small wood-burning stoves as their only warmth. Conversely, barracks become sweltering in summer with no cooling systems installed in most. These dismal living quarters foster rampant diseases, including reported outbreaks of SARS and likely COVID-19 tearing through the military ranks in recent years. The absence of sanitation, temperature control, overcrowding, and the generally abysmal state of military housing take constant physical and mental tolls on North Korean troops. Conscripts can spend over half a decade or more living jammed together in such impoverished barracks as these Spartan shelters represent their sole refuge during their harsh mandates of service. Number 2. All day, every day. Not only does serving in North Korea's Korean People's Army entail intensive physical drills, ideological indoctrination, and menial duties during set training hours, but it truly represents an all-consuming lifestyle for enlisted personnel. Leave is extremely rare. Once they begin military life, soldiers spend nearly every day immersed in monotonous state-mandated activities with negligible time off. A typical conscript may train rigorously from 5 or 6 in the morning until lights out around 10 at night, including only 2 to 3 hours of personal breaks, often occupied by political education sessions anyway. Weekend passes to exit campgrounds last just a few hours at most. 1 or 2 weeks of home leave may be permitted just once during their whole multi-year service tenure. Vacation for events like weddings or even funerals still requires formal applications submitted up the chain of command. 10 days is typically the maximum period granted, and even then, frequently canceled or denied. Holidays also offer little respite, as special parades or training simply replace regular duties on those ceremonial occasions. Outside of sleep, North Korean troops spend almost all waking hours actively under military direction, with no personal freedoms. Number 1. Can't leave the military. North Korean soldiers essentially relinquish their freedom and autonomy when they enter military service. It operates akin to imprisonment, where personnel give up rights to travel, communicate, and leave at will. Refusing orders or one's duty stations results in unrelenting torture, imprisonment, and even death. The only way to escape is to defect, which itself carries tremendous risks of execution for soldiers and their families. Those looking to defect essentially have 2 options: trying to sneak across the border into China or attempting to cross the heavily fortified DMZ into South Korea. The former poses threats of being shot on sight, plus the dangers of being caught and sent back to North Korea. Punishments for failed defectors are severe, with offenders either immediately executed or sentenced to concentration camps. The risks are so great that families are often kept unaware of plans to defect. If soldiers successfully escape, their families left behind face similarly brutal consequences. Parents, children, and siblings may be imprisoned or killed as punishment for the defectors' treachery. This further disincentives leaving as soldiers grapple with the guilt of endangering loved ones. The military essentially takes families hostage to deter desertion. The inability to freely leave and the immense risks make clear why North Korean soldiers remain trapped in service unless they succeed in defecting abroad. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.